Welcome. This is Jim, host of the Faith Influencer podcast, where we're going to dive into discussions on faith's role in everyday life, from navigating blended families to overcoming challenges. I'm a husband, a father, a Bible teacher, an advocate for applying faith to everyday life. So tune in as I share personal stories, valuable insights, and practical wisdom. Welcome back to Faith Influencer. This is Jim Cunningham. I'm going to talk to you and maybe provide you what may very well be the most important information that you've ever received on the health and success of your blended family. So I know that's a big promise. We're going to dig into it, but I have lots to cover, so let's get started. Let me just make the statement right at the beginning. Your marriage won't save your blended family. Boundaries will. I'm going to say it again. Your marriage will not save your blended family. Boundaries will. A lot of couples think this, that their marriage vows automatically create a blended family. But here's the truth. Love does not blend a home. Boundaries do. I'm not discounting the marital love, but that's not going to create a strong family. So I'm going to describe that to you as we go through. So if your structure in your family is weak, then your marriage is going to crumble under the weight of raising kids. Okay? If the structure of your family is weak, your marriage is going to crumble because that's what's going to happen when you raise each other's kids together who don't share the same history. But if the boundaries are strong, then your marriage is going to get stronger and the family will follow. So all of that, let me tell you a story. I had a couple come to me and they said, we really love each other. This is the right marriage. We've joined our families. It's our second time around. We want to make it work. We love each other deeply. So since that is true, they ask, why is this so hard? Why is it so hard? And I asked them one question and they froze. My question was, tell me about the boundaries you've put in place. They froze. They looked at each other. They had no agreement on discipline. They had no plan for roles in the home. They had no united front. The kids ran the schedule. The bio parent protected their kids. The step parent felt powerless. But somehow they thought because they loved each other, it wouldn't be this way. So what I told them was, you don't have a marriage problem. You have a boundaries problem. And that's the case in most families. Most blended families are not having a marriage problem. They're having a boundaries problem. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to dig into. So a blended family fails not because people don't love each other, but because they haven't agreed upon a structure for the family, for the marriage, for the kids. Love is important. Let's say it this way. Love is the fuel, but boundaries are the framework. So without the frame, what happens to the house? The house collapses. So why is it that marriage is not enough? Why is it that you get married and you really love each other? Why is that not enough? Well, one, I'm going to give you some reasons here. Why is marriage by itself not enough? One, because kids, they're happy you love each other, but that does not do anything for their security as far as they've got grief over the divorce. They have loyalty conflicts going on inside of them. They have attachment needs because this is a new family. They have all of that going on, even though you have a lovely marriage. So that didn't change anything for the kids there. Number two, you're merging two entirely different cultures, not just two hearts. You're emerging two cultures. I've often wondered what it would be like as I see friends of mine who married someone from a different culture. In my mind, I think it would be difficult because there's so many things that are so different in cultures. I'm thinking some people that I know that I could never marry into that culture. I'm thinking of this culture. It's probably more than one culture, but there are some cultures out there who have no reality of time. I mean, if you're 30 minutes late to wherever you're going, That's okay. If you're 45 minutes late, that's okay. Not me. I I I could never handle that. That would be a cultural shock for someone to say time isn't a factor. And then there are some of you saying, listen, you don't have to marry into a different culture for that to be true. You just need to be married to my wife. Uh, or maybe husband, but I'm going to say most of the times it's the wife who is late, or is that just me? You can throw it in the comments what you really think. But you know what happens when you get a blended, when you marry into a blended family, or you marry a blended family, combine them together? You know what you've really done? You've emerged two cultures. Because with these two cultures, you have different routines. You were used to your routine. You were used to your routine. You have different ways you discipline, different discipline patterns. You have different communication styles. Everything is different. So you have taken two cultures and you put them together. So what do you expect? The marriage itself isn't going to fix all of that. And then here's the third thing. Love doesn't solve role confusion. Let me tell you what I'm talking about here. Who disciplines in the family? I'm talking about there's a confusion of who does what. Who enforces in the family? What is the step parent's authority in your family? Where does the ex-spouse fit in? Marriage doesn't answer those questions. You love your husband, great. You love your wife, great. But that doesn't answer those kinds of questions. So, who solves role confusion? Have you dealt with that? And then here's another one. What about the emotional pressure? Emotional pressure, and if you're in a blended family, you're gonna get religious and say amen right now, because the emotional pressure is way higher in the second marriage and in blended families than in your first marriage. Um, in the when I say emotional pressure, step parents, you walk on eggshells. Bio parents, you feel torn. Kids feel insecure. And what does this environment demand? Structure. You have to have structure. So let me give you the real boundaries that need to be in place. Boundary number one, there needs to be unity with the adults. So the husband and wife, you love each other, but there needs to be unity as to the structure of the home. So I'm going to say, those of you who think that if the adults are unified, then the home becomes perfect, let me tell you the worst thing you can do in your home. Now, this sounds total opposite of what you think. But if you don't have a unified front between the mom and dad and the husband and the wife, let me tell you what happens. Then your home becomes a democracy. Or your home becomes a democracy. Let me tell you about a democracy in your home. The last thing your kids need is a democracy. If you don't have a united front and you haven't nailed down the structural part, then your home becomes a democracy and your kids are going to go crazy in a democracy. Your kids don't need a democracy. Your kids need leadership. That's what they need. But a lack of structure turns into everybody has a say-so. Everybody does what they want. Everybody's voice has equal weight. That is not true in a home. There needs to be leadership. So that's why you have to have this boundary of structure. So unity, we get this wrong idea. Unity is not agreeing on everything. That's not unity. You could take two cats and tie their tails together and they're unified, but that's not unity, I promise. Unity is not agreeing on everything. It is presenting one plan and then following through with it together. So that's where husband and wife has to come together. Your marriage by itself is not going to create unity. Here's the next boundary: clear roles. There must be clear roles. So let me define some. This is why I said this can be one of the most important things you hear on blended family. Even though we talked about it before, I'm saying it all succinctly. So without defined roles, resentment's going to grow. Now, some of you are already there. Some of you men right now are already there because your wife and her bio children and you feel left out and resentment's growing. Some of you wives right now, you feel very resentful towards your husband. So let me give you some defined roles real quick. You just mark these down. I'm just telling you, I'm not even going to try to convince you. I'm just telling you these are absolutely true. Here's one. The bio parent is the primary disciplinarian. Go look at other podcasts in the past where I dealt with this in depth. Bio parents must be the primary disciplinarian for their children. Step parent, what is your primary role? As a step parent, your primary role is relationships. You are the relational bridge builder with your stepchildren. So you come to me and say, hey, I know I'm not to be the disciplinarian over my stepchildren. What am I to do? One thing, build a relationship with them. That's your job. That's the most important job you have as a step parent, for sure, initially. I will say that down the road, as trust builds, and it takes a while, but as trust builds, then maybe you two can start sharing discipline in some ways. But for a long time, your one job is to build relationships. So, uh, and never reverse those roles. You never reverse those roles. So, you know what this will do? This is what studies show. You're going to be blown away by this. Studies show that if you'll follow through with the roles that I just gave you, that this alone will prevent 70% of unnecessary conflict just by following the roles that I just gave you. All right, let me give you another boundary, non-negotiables. We talked about this recently. These are core values that you have as a family, and adults and kids together must follow: respect, honesty, good grades. Those are non-negotiable roles. Everybody follows that. Let's keep going. Here's another boundary. Um, Parenting decisions are made in private. This is with any home, but for sure in blended families. Never argue in front of the kids over parenting things. That gives them strength. That gives them courage to be rebellious. So don't argue about those things in front of them. And not only does it give them a license to be rebellious because you're arguing in front of each other, it elevates insecurity, is what it creates when you do that in front of them. When a husband and wife yell at each other, and I've got some friends who tell me they do that. I said, what's your parenting style? And I say, yell. That's how we do it. We yell. I said, you yell at the kids? They said, well, we yell at the kids, but we yell at each other too. Why do you do that? Well, that's just how we've always done it. Stop doing that. So whenever you disagree on something, fix it behind closed doors. Absolutely essential. Here's another boundary. Loyalties must be respected. Loyalties must be respected. Stepkids will not love you like they love their bio parent. And guess what? That's okay. And you're not trying to create that. You're not trying to manipulate that. You're building a relationship with them. It's never going to be like their bio parent, but your boundary is to respect that loyalty they have to their bio parent. What happens when you degrade your stepkid's bio parent? Then you've just lost ground with them. They are not going to respect you. So you have to respect the loyalty they have to their bio parent. And you think this, and I understand this, I understand it, but you think their bio parent is such an idiot or a jerk, or their bio parent is so, it doesn't matter. Their kid's going to love them. Doesn't matter how bad they are. Doesn't matter what they're doing. They could be the worst parent, but you know what? There's a biological bond there that's stronger than anything else. So they're going to love them. So even though they're awful and you can't stand, maybe there are times when a mother would say to me that my ex-husband disappoints our kids so much and he promises stuff and never follows through with it. Well, guess what? I hate that. And that's disappointing. But I'll tell you what, their bio kid still loves them. Doesn't matter. They still love them. So, stepdad, when your wife's ex is an idiot, that does not open the door for you to talk bad about them in front of their children. Okay? You will never win that way. So what happens when the boundaries are missing? Because I'm telling you that a marriage is not enough. You must have boundaries. What happens when they're missing? Well, one, the step parent's going to become resentful. If there are no boundaries, all step parents out there are saying amen right now. If there are no boundaries, step parents will become resentful. There has to be boundaries for step parents. As a matter of fact, you know what? I started to do a whole section on this one thing. I'm not going to do it, but I started to. is that the biggest problem in blended families is not the step parent, it's the bio parent. It's not the step parent, it's the bio parent. Why? Because the bio parent has to set some boundaries for their children. And if there's no structure and no boundaries, the step parent will become resentful. And then here's what happens to the biological parent. If there are no structure, no boundaries, then the biological parent will be torn between their children and their new spouse. You're going to be torn. You've got loyalty towards your children, but you've married this person. So you're torn. Listen, you can solve all of that if you would just put some boundaries and structure in place. And then without boundaries, kids are going to push the limits. And then you're not going to like your kids. And then especially the stepchildren's not going to like his stepkids because they're little brats, because you don't have boundaries. It's boundaries. And then you know what happens when there's no structure and no boundaries and you didn't reach any agreements. And so you're just flowing along and everything is out of order and you're wondering if you're going to make it. Here's what's going to happen. Then your marriage is going to take a defensive posture. You're going to become defensive with each other. You're going to start to resent your marriage. Oh, the marriage in the beginning that you thought the love for each other would solve all of the blended family and be great because your kids would see how marriage is really supposed to be. You know, that's idealistic. And theoretically, it sounds like it ought to be true, but it's not. If you don't have the structure and the boundaries, you're going to start pulling away from each other down the road. You just will. It's just going to happen. And everyone in the end is going to feel unsafe. I'm curious if those of you who are listening, and I always appreciate how you respond, I'm curious if those of you who are listening are just now identifying some of the issues that's going on in your blended family and why it's not working. Some of the things we're talking about now, you're like, that's exactly what's happening in our home. Now you know why. Now you know why. So you don't want your household to become reactive. You want it to be proactive. So I'm asking you to be proactive, and I'm giving you some ways to do that. So when there's no structure, then the love becomes smothered. It's under a cloud. But then here's the opposite. What happens when there are boundaries? What happens when the boundaries are defined and the boundaries are strong? Well, let's go down the list. When you put structure and boundaries, and you tell me, is this the family you want? When you put boundaries and structures in place, one, step parents are going to feel empowered. Step parents are going to feel empowered. Two, biological parents are going to feel supported. You're going to feel supported. Next, kids are going to feel predictability. They're going to know what's expected. They're going to know the structure. They're going to know the boundaries, and it's going to be predictable, and that makes them feel safe. That makes them feel safe. And then one thing I didn't even mention with a lack of that boundaries, let me go back and mention, when you have a lack of boundaries, that ex-spouse finds his way or her way into your marriage when there's no boundaries. So when there are boundaries in place, then the ex-spouse drama fades because they can't penetrate the system that you've created, the structure that you've created. And then the marriage grows stronger. And when the marriage grows stronger, then the household goes stronger. And then this thing you want so desperately, everybody begins to relax. The tension begins to fade. When the structure is right. When the structure is right. And when the structure is right, then the love has room to grow. Can you believe? All about boundaries and structure. So, your marriage is the heart of the blended family. I agree. But the boundaries are like the rib cage that protects it. Understand what I'm saying? And if you get the boundaries right, everything else gets easier. So, a lot of you listening right now are identifying some issues in your home. I'm looking forward to your responses. Tell me what you've done right. Tell me what you've done wrong. Tell me where you see what I'm talking about and it's the case in your marriage. Tell me where you have seen your marriage grow, your household grow stronger, your marriage grow stronger because you put structure in place, you put boundaries in place. And if you're struggling with some of these boundaries and how to do that, say it in the comments and I'll help you with that. I'll respond to those and it'll help everybody. So let's make our blended family stronger. Let's get rid of all the conflict by creating structure and boundaries. Thanks for joining me. I always appreciate you being here with Faith Influencer, our blended family podcast. We'll see you next time.